Hey guys, it's Chris, and I'm back with another Westworld Season 3, Episode 4 video, and let me just say right up front, I'm just not feeling Westworld this year. I thought this episode was bad, actually. I mean, not horrible, not complete trash, but it just seems to be going in an odd direction, and a lot of things are not making sense, and they're trying to, do the twist thing just to do the twist thing. Anyway, let's get into this episode a little bit. I don't understand what they're doing. I mean, I can see kind of where I think they're going, at least. I mean, at least they're leading us to believe that, and there could be some major twist, but let me just go over some of the things during this episode. I'm not going to recap the whole thing, but let's just jump right into the obvious thing. Dolores is just everyone, apparently. So now we have the whole thing. The last couple episodes was, what pearls did she bring out of Westworld? Did she bring Peter Abernathy, who seemed to have the key in his head to the satellite data, where the Valley Beyond is? Did she bring, Clementine or some of these other characters? Teddy was another one. Obviously, I don't think anybody that's been into the Valley Beyond would be out here because that was cut off and, they destroyed the actual forge itself. So I don't think anything like Teddy. I never thought that, but there were questions about who these other pearls were, because she was Charlotte. When she left the park, that was actually Dolores and a Charlotte host, and Charlotte is actually dead. But now we find out that she actually left Westworld. She went and created herself again just to look like herself for some reason. I don't know why there was a need for that. But now we find out that she is just everybody. I mean, she's killing everybody and replacing them with a copy of their body, just a husk, a host. But it's actually her pearl that she's copied and made, 5 copies of or whatever, which don't make a lot of sense when you think about Bernard, because Bernard is Bernard, and she apparently created him for some type of adversary. And there was really no need to do so. If she really wants to get through with this plan to take over the world or expose it for what it is, as she put it, why did she create Bernard in the first place? Why did she recreate Bernard in the first place? Is it some kind of sentimental thing? He's not going to stop her, and then obviously Maeve is the good guy, so to speak. So I'm not sure if we're supposed to pull for Dolores. I can't stand her, actually, anymore. When, of course, in Season 1, you were all for Dolores and the host waking up and all this kind of stuff, but now she's just kind of an over-the-top asshole, and I don't really care for her at all. So I'm not really sure who I'm supposed to be cheering for. It's another one of those things, kind of like, Tiger King that we just did the podcast episode on. Everybody's kind of an asshole, so I'm not really sure what's happening anymore. And don't get me wrong, I don't want everything, cut into black and white to where, you're pulling for the good guys in white and the bad guys in black, and they're the villains and they're the heroes and all that. I like the gray stuff, the gray area, so to speak. But anyway, so we have Dolores herself. We have Charlotte, who is now being called Shaloris. She is actually Dolores as well. You have now Sato or Musashi, which, came from Samurai World, or Shogun World, I should say, and he's now back in the story as well. He was an underground guy who sold blood and identities or whatever that Dolores replaced with herself, of course. And then we have Martin, the right-hand man of Liam. But that was a big question, too. Why didn't she just replace Liam? I mean, Liam doesn't really run Insight, but he does have power there, and she needed his hash key or whatever, and apparently that's something stored in your blood. So I don't mind the futuristic stuff, the sci-fi style stuff, as far as, fingerprint scans that detects your blood, and you have some kind of algorithm hash key in your blood. I think that's kind of cool. But I guess the point is just you kind of needed to have some of these characters come back, and now apparently they're not. I mean, maybe they will in some way, but the odd thing is, if everybody's Dolores, then why did Charlotte or Shaloris have a problem understanding who she was when she woke her up the first time? I mean, Martin didn't have a problem when she replaced him with herself. Sato or Musashi that we know of didn't have a problem when she replaced him with herself. So why did Charlotte have some kind of issue where she needed to calm down for a little bit in the hotel room and spoon with the other Dolores? So Dolores was essentially spooning with herself, with a big theory there that was, Peter Abernathy, perhaps even Teddy, whatever. So I don't really get it. I mean, I get the idea that, as she said in the episode herself tonight, that if you want to do something right, do it yourself. But at the same time, it's like kind of taking away all those other characters, and now it's just like Dolores playing God. She's creating everybody in her own image, and it didn't really make a lot of sense in the first place. She could have remained Charlotte Hill and then just went out and replaced people as she needed to, but she had to recreate herself. But I guess if that was the case, then Ev and Rachel would be out of a job. So anyway, I just don't get the idea of her just replacing everybody with herself. I mean, I do from her perspective, but why the show chose to go that direction is what I'm saying, when in fact she did create Bernard, obviously, in his old house or whatever, just to create herself an adversary? I'm not really sure. Is she trying to make it harder on herself, or does she really have some kind of deep-seated feeling for Arnold, who was the original guy before Bernard, obviously, since he actually helped to free her in the first place? But Ford did that as well. Ford actually was going along with that plan, as we found out late in season 1. Let's move on to the Man in Black, the MIB. William was back in the story, and I think he's basically done. I don't get this, because he's done some horrible things, no doubt about it, and Dolores wants him to suffer, and it's basically a revenge. But now she's doing the same essential thing that him, Delos itself, and now Insight's doing. She's become the same thing she's trying to destroy. So 2 wrongs don't make a right. So should he suffer for some of the things he did to her? Sure, absolutely. But I think he has to some extent. He's sitting there in his house going crazy. He's having visions or whatever, and that makes you wonder if he's a host or not. They're still playing off that whole theme that's getting kind of tired, honestly. And we saw Dolores, I should say Shalores, prick his neck earlier and, take a sample of his blood or put something in his blood. So it makes you wonder if that's what's causing the hallucination. So I just think that the story with William now is just kind of dumb. And he's just in a nut house now and going to lose his power over Delos. So my point being that he may still be in the show. Maybe there is something else for him to do, but I just don't see it. If he's in a nut house and he has no more power, he loses his shares to Shalores, then there's no point for Ed Harris to be in the show anymore. One of the most interesting characters in the show, and I think they basically just wrote him off in 1 episode. So I don't really like that aspect. I hope that there's something left for him to do. Maybe he will figure out something. This is the part where he's supposed to be starting to really self-reflect or whatever. And it kind of goes back to season 2 when he was looking for the maze, which ended up being a thing for the host only. So now it seems finally in season 3, in this 1 episode, he's going through that process almost of his own personal maze, as she said so herself. And of course, we go back to Shirok now. Shirok is teamed up with Maeve. Maeve is absolutely my favorite character. She is a badass. But why does she have to die? I just wondered why they have not removed that programming to where when she gets stabbed through the stomach, that she has to die. Like she has to bleed out like a regular person. I mean, we saw Dolores a couple episodes ago get shot and damn near die or whatever, supposedly, and she gets in the ambulance and then magically recovers later on. So why does Maeve have to actually die in the sense of just being stabbed in the gut with a sword when she was fighting what ended up being Dolores, who was in Sato's shell or husk or whatever you want to call it? Why is that program still there where she has to fall over and die and somebody has to pick her up and fix her again? So she's so powerful she can control electronics through the network or whatever. I thought that was pretty badass. I hate the idea that Shirok has kind of a control button over her. I think she'll get rid of that at some point, don't get me wrong. She is obviously going to come back. So why not make her OP? Just go ahead and give her that power to not worry about death. I mean, yeah, if they, destroy her body, that would be one thing, just like the Terminator. If they don't have a body, there's nothing they can really do. But just getting stabbed, those organs are not real. It's only the programming where she would actually die and bleed out or whatever from a physical wound. So why not just remove that? I guess it's just to kind of hold her up or whatever to make Dolores a little bit more OP, like she's going to win this ultimate game or whatever she's playing. So I don't know. Maybe, Shirok, next time when you bring Maeve back next episode, assuming that's the case, just take that programming out so she's not completely disabled by one mortal wound, because she's not mortal. But of course, they're continuing the theme that Shirok, created Rehoboam to create basically a giant Westworld throughout the entire world. So, some kind of state of control, a program that gives you a future that you really don't have any free will. So there's all those themes, those biblical themes of free will versus, destiny and that type of thing. And I've always enjoyed that about Westworld, but now it's just getting to be where you have a bunch of assholes doing the same thing, trying to kill each other. And Maeve right now is the only character I care about. They've kind of just, alienated everyone so much, and even Dolores so much, where she has no humanity left, or whatever you want to call it, that you just don't give a shit anymore. And Maeve's the only one I care about. I just hope she, wins the game, maybe gets beamed up with her daughter in the valley beyond where nobody can touch the world or whatever, and she lives happily ever after. That's all I really want to see now, because essentially Shirok and Dolores essentially have the same goal, and that is control. Again, like I said before, Dolores is making other hosts in her own image, so she's playing God, so I get that. One more little thing I had a problem with in this episode was Stubbs. I like Stubbs. I think Stubbs is cool. He's there to help Bernard, because she did recreate Bernard for whatever reason, like we talked about. And Stubbs is there and then goes to stop Dolores, and all of a sudden, he can't fight. He was the guy created for security back in season 1, because that was a big theory back in the day that he was a host. And in fact, it turns out verified that he is. But now all of a sudden he can't fight, and Dolores can just kick his ass. I mean, maybe she downloaded some information from him too. She learned how to fight through all the programming or whatever, because she did get to the forge and learn all this stuff or whatever, download all this information. So maybe she got a download like Neo in the Matrix, you know.
I know Kung Fu.
Or whatever, but, you know, come on, man. Stubbs was created to be security, a fighter, that type of thing, where Dolores was created to be kind of a, you know, a cowgirl. And yes, they've grown and become sentient, but they should be fairly equal in the sense of being hosts. They're both hosts. They're robots, for Christ's sake. I guess their muscles are essentially real. They are synthetic, you know, so it seems to me he would still be a lot stronger than her, but apparently not. And then, of course, we get to Caleb. You know, I don't have a real big problem with Caleb. I thought Caleb was a pretty cool character. He's essentially the human version of Dolores back in season 1. You know, we saw him waking up like her in previous episodes, and now he's joined her. So I got a feeling that he's going to end up betraying her. We all thought that Charlotte was going to do it, and maybe Charlotte still will, or I should say, I'm sorry, Shalores, because that's the big question. You know, is Shalores, does she have her own type of will in there? Will they become separate type of people because they have different experiences? It's just a shell of a body, and Dolores made copies of herself, so she shouldn't care what skin she's in. She knows what she is. There's no issue about that. So I don't see now, you know, Shalores turning on Dolores or any of the other hosts for that matter. So it has to be Caleb, and I don't know why she would go through all this stuff and then create herself an obstacle like Bernard, and then, of course, now put her trust back into a human. Is that going to be her fatal flaw, actually seeing a human that she likes for some reason because they're very similar or whatever? And now he's going to be the one to realize that she doesn't care about human life and whatever, and she'll do whatever it takes to take over the damn world. And by the way, James and I just released our latest podcast episode on the Tiger King. So click right over here to check that out, or you can click right over here for a video essay I did on why fantasy matters, why we're all addicted to sci-fi and fantasy, and finding purpose through these stories. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.